Moving right along. We are now going to begin graphing some more. And today we are going to be talking about plotting points, but this is going to be a second way to graph. And that way is by finding what we call the intercepts. And the intercepts have a certain meaning. Sometimes we give it to you in symbols, sometimes we give it to you in words. Hopefully, you'll be able to understand both forms, words and symbols. And we are then also going to be talking about graphing special types of equations. Now, those equations are going to be either vertical or horizontal lines, which you'll find out in a minute. And then, of course, we want to model data, which means story problem time. Okay, now, here are some properties that we're going to need to be aware of. Some of the properties for the solutions of two variables is that, as we spoke about, you are going to need to make sure that you write your answer as an ordered pair. Also, when we graph a line, you have to remember that a line has an infinite number of points, which is why they're arrows at both ends of the number line. Now, sometimes because of technology, some people have gotten away from the arrows on both lines, but you need to know that it does exist. And also, it's straight. If you find that you don't have a straight line with all the points that you found, either in the table up to this point, then you know one of the points is off. But now you have 2 points. This is, in this particular case, the intercepts. And this is the second way to graph an equation. And you're going to find that if we are plotting points, the first thing I want to do is to graph my intercepts, or at least understand how to find my intercepts in a table. Now, this is going to talk about the x-intercept, which happens to be this point. Now notice, it is sitting on the x-line. Okay. The x-intercept of a graph of an equation is a point that intersects the x-axis, which means it sits on the horizontal axis. But algebraically, when we're looking for an x value, which is the x-intercept, the y value is 0. Okay? And something you also need to know is that as we go further, they're going to talk about finding the zeros. The zeros are my x-intercepts. Okay? And sometimes we only have one, but as we go through further and further in mathematics, we can have more than 1 0. And that's saying the x has a number when the y value is 0. So then comes the next one. This is known as the y-intercept. Now, the y-intercept has a symbol. It's going to be 0, and they're going to put a B here. This B is my y-intercept. This is a symbol you're going to see. Now, notice the y-intercept sits on this vertical line. It's right here. Okay? So if I have an x-intercept and I have a y-intercept, I have 2 points. I connect them. But here's the other thing. Algebraically, when you want a y-intercept, because of this symbol, the x value is 0. The x value is 0. Now, with that said, let's look at a couple. Okay. When you are looking for intercepts, you're looking for 2 specific points. Now, this is the y-intercept. This point and this point are y-intercepts. And if you'll notice, my x value is 0. When I look at my horizontal line, notice that's my x. My y values are 0. So the terminology of saying an x-intercept of 4 is saying we have an ordered pair of 4, 0. If we're given a y-intercept, we know that it's the ordered pair 0 first, then the y value. Now, with that said, that's why we come to the second way of graphing. This is called the graph 2x plus y equals -3 using the intercepts. Now, and then they're going to ask you to find a third point. Now, remember I told you that third point was the checkpoint? Well, this is where I put a 0 here and a 0 here. These are my 2 intercepts. Now, notice my x is 0. I'm finding a number for y. Well, if I do this in my head, 2 times 0 is 0, and my y is -3. Well, notice I have a number for y, which means I'm putting a dot right down here at the ordered pair 0, 3. This was my y-intercept. Because I'm looking for a value for y when x is 0. Now let's go backwards. Okay, I now have y as 0. Okay, this is going to require a little bit more. I want to solve for x, which means I'm going to get a -3/2. Now, some people don't like to graph fractions, so they make this into a -1.5. They use the decimal to graph. Now, do you see my 0.5? Well, the 0.5 is going to be, and I'm going negative, so it's going to be over here. It's going to be this point right here. This is my x-intercept. And do you see that it sits on this x line? Okay. Now, I need to pick a third point. Now, notice here that I have only going up to 5. So probably I want to pick something that's going to get me somewhere in here between the -5 and the +5. Well, you can pick whatever you want, but I'm going to say pick small. I'm going to pick a -1. Or let's do better. Let's pick -2. Okay? That means this value is -2. Well, that means I have 2 times -2 plus y is equal to -3. Well, this is -4 plus y is -3. Now, if I add 4 to both sides, my y is 1. So -2, 1 should put me right here. And notice what happens when I connect the blue and the green and I continue to go through. Do you see it's going to hit my point right there? So this point is my confirmation that the blue and the green point, the two intercepts, are correct. Okay. Now, let's try again. Okay. Now this time, I'm going to put the 0 here and the 0 here. Well, that means this is going to be my x-intercept. But notice my y is 0. Well, that means my x is 4. On this line, 4, 0 is my point. I go right 4, left. Now, some people like to put left, right, up, down. Your choice. Okay. Now, the second one, okay, this is going to require a little more work because this time my x is 0. Okay. My x is 0. Well, that means I'm dividing by a -3 to give me a -4/3, or as I said, a -1 1/3. So that means we're somewhere, let's just say right about there. Those are my two intercepts. This is my y-intercept, and you notice it sits on this line. Now, let's pick something a little different. Let's pick a positive one. Now, that's for x, okay? That means I'm going back to my equation, and this is going to be 1 minus 3y is equal to 4. Well, if I subtract 1, I get a -3y is equal to 3. Divide by -3, and I get a -1. Now notice that means my point, my third point, is right between the green and the blue. And if I connect them, sure enough, this point confirms that I have a line that goes through the green and the blue point. Okay, now this one, I'm still using my intercepts. So I'm going to put y is 0, x is 0. Well, again, if y is 0, that means I've got to subtract 3 from both sides. So what I have is a -3 is equal to a -1/2 x. Well, I multiply both sides by the reciprocal, -2/1. So that means that my x value is a positive 6. Positive 6, which means it's going to sit out here someplace. And I probably should make it closer. Okay. That's my x-intercept. Well, the beautiful part is this time my x is 0. Well, that means that cancels out. Y is 3. Now remember, this is my y-intercept, which means it's got to sit on this line, which is 0, 3. Now I have a red dot and a blue dot. I'm going to pick something in between, but I want to be very honest with you. Do you see I have a number 2 here? How could I get rid of fractions? By making that x value a 2. Negative 1/2 times 2 plus 3. This is going to give me a negative 1 plus 3, or I have the point 2, 2. And notice my 2, 2 is going to sit right, got to go up a little bit, right here. And the reason is, when I draw the line, okay, and my blue point should probably be closer, should be right here. Okay. Okay. Let's make a better line. Okay. Because see, if I go here, through here, through here, this point confirms that the blue and the red point are in the right place. Okay. Now, this one's kind of interesting. Okay. I still have to use my intercepts, but I want you to notice what happens. If x is 0, y is 0. If y is 0, x is 0. Do you notice that these are the same points? They're right here. That's why I need this third point. Okay? If I pick 1 here, 1 plus y is equal to 0. My y is negative 1, which means I'm going right, down. These 2 points make my line. Now, you might want to try and make a 4th point, because these 2 technically are the same. If I picked, and I'm just going to say 3, I know this has got to be negative 3, which would be right here, a blue point. Do you see it's on my red line? It helps me make sure that I have the correct line. So when you have the same point twice, because the intercepts are both 0, 0, then you might want to go for 2 other points. This point made the second dot on my red line, but I want to make sure that red line's correct. So what I did was I did a 3rd point, and that 3rd point is what I needed. Now, any questions with this? Now, here's where some fun is going to come in. Okay, sometimes you're going to be given this equation. Notice there's no y value. That's why when we started chapter 4, we had to remember that in the form ax plus by equals c, that you knew there was a 0 y there. Well, this is one that you either recognize or you memorize, or you use this equation. Because when you have x equal to a number and by is missing, you're going to have a vertical line. And we're going to prove it to you in a minute. So when the by value is missing, when the by is missing, you have a vertical line. And I'm going to prove it to you in a minute. And then what happens if we have the x value missing? Notice right here, y is equal to 3. If the ax is missing, if the ax term is missing, you're going to have a horizontal line. If in the form ax plus by equals c, if this ax term is missing, you have a horizontal line. And I'm going to show you right here. Okay. Now, we want the intercepts. This is where you have to recognize this is x plus 0y is equal to 3. This is my 0. This is my 0. Well, I want to show you something. If I put 0 here, you have this equation. 0y is equal to 3. When I solve this equation, this is y is equal to 3 over 0. This is undefined. We don't have that point. But if I give a value for x, let's just say I give a value for y. Notice right here, instead of this value, okay, I'm going to make this 0. Well, it's already missing, which means that this is 3, 0. Okay. So I'm going to graph 3, 0, which is right here. Now, remember what this means? If I put a 1 there, it's still going to disappear and give me a 3? If I put a 2 here, for 0 times 2, it's still 0. Y is 3. Notice what I'm getting. A vertical line. And as you remember, in this equation, when the by term in ax plus by equals c is missing, you have a vertical line. We've just proved it. And notice right up here, when the by term is, notice I told you, we have a vertical line. Now, notice right here. Again, this is 0 x plus y is equal to -1. Well, if I put a 0 here, y is going to be -1. But I can't put, in this case, a 0 for the y, because this is saying 0 plus 0 is equal to -1. This is undefined. But I can pick a number for x. This is still 0 plus y is equal to -1. If I pick a -3, 0 times -3 is still 0. And I get a -1. All of my y values are -1. And let's graph this. 0, -1, 1, -1, -3. Notice what I have. I have a horizontal line. So, if AX is missing in the equation, AX plus BY equals C, then you have a horizontal line. And that's exactly what happens. This AX term is missing. So I've got a horizontal line. Now, some people like to memorize these two concepts. Some people, just like I do, we can figure it out if we had to. But we've got to remember the form AX plus BY is equal to C. Now, one more slide. Okay. Now, this is a story problem you're going to see over and over again, and you are going to have to understand what this means. Okay, it is saying, here's an application using intercepts. And remember, we have two. We have an X and we have a Y. Now, the annual cost of college tuition and fees at a private four-year institution can be modeled, and they're giving us an equation. Now, this is the part you're going to have to be real careful with. X is the number of years after. Now, what does that mean? That means I didn't start to keep records until January of 2013. But during that year, which is my 0 year, for 12 months in the year 2013, I collected records. So my after the year 2013, we are looking at the ordered pair 0 and then a cost. This is the Y value. But this 0 represents 2013. If I talk 2014, the X value is 1 with the cost. If I talk 2015, it's year 2 with the cost. This 0 is the year I start. But remember, if we start in January, I have to go 12 months to collect information. So this phrase, X is the number of years after, you have to remember that it's 0, which makes this your X or your Y-intercept, because we have a value for Y. This is your Y-intercept. So be careful with these phrases. If it tells you after 2013, that means the 0 year, the year you're starting to collect information, is 2013. But you have to go 12 months to have a full year's data. So basically, when I start in 2013, I'm basically saying my cost is 0. Unless I go a little further here, and that's what's going to happen. So watch this phrase. And that brings us to here. Okay, the annual cost of tuition and fees at a private four-year institution can be modeled by the equation. And then we have that phrase. X is the number of years after 2013, and Y is the cost of tuition and fees in dollars. Now, I want you to notice something. Find the Y-intercept. Okay. To find the Y-intercept, make the X value in the equation 0. So that means right here, this is 0, which means this is canceling out, because 0 times $1,172.50 is 0. And what does it leave me? It leaves me the cost, which means it's $2,490. And sometimes they put a little. This is my Y-intercept. It is the cost that was January 1st in 2013. That's when I started taking data. Okay. So 0 is, let's see, I'm going to write it out, type it out here. Okay. So the, let's go here. The Y-intercept tells us that in 2013, the initial year, the cost of tuition and fees is $24,909. In 2013, when I decided to keep records, the tuition was at a certain amount. Now, here comes the fun part. Okay. Now, this is where you really got to understand what we talked about. They want you to find the approximate cost in 2015 and in 2016. Okay, this is where you have to be careful. If my 0 year was 2013, my 2015 year has the number 2 for X. This X will be 2. You're not putting in the year 2015 because of this phrase. And that means my X will be 3 when I do 2016. So let's go a little further here, because I'm wanting 2015, which means my ordered pair has an X of 2. Okay, let's put this in. Y is equal to 1172.50 times 2 plus 24,909. Okay. So I have 1172 times 2, which is $2,345 plus 24,900. My Y value is $27,254. This 2 represents 2015. It does not represent, and we don't write 2015. Now we're going to try it again. This is going to be 3. Well, this is going to be Y equals $1,172.50 times 3 plus 24,909. Now, this is going to give us $28,400 426. Now, you've got to have 2 decimal places for money. You've got to have 2 decimal places for money. Okay? So this is what we're looking at. Okay? And then this is what you're going to like. Okay. Graph. That's my C part. Okay. Now, this is where you're going to have to be careful. Okay. This is going to be years. But remember, we're not writing down here 2013, 14, 2015. We're writing this little corner represents 2013. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is years, but remember, this is 2015. This is 2016. We're not writing those. What you have to understand is this X is just going to be 2. This will be 3. But this is 2013. This is 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That is my years. And notice, I don't have a break here. I started with 0. That's what that said. X is equal to the number of years after. Now, I'm going to make a big zigzag here. Well, where am I going to start? Well, first off, this happens to say 24900 or 909. Well, I'm going to start here, and because my pen is a little big here, I'm going to make this 2013 so you see. Okay, I am going to make this 24,900. And I'm going to make this 25,900. 26,900. 27,900. And then I'm going to make up here 28,900. Okay. And then I'm going to graph those points that I have. Well, I know that my Y-intercept, which is on this vertical line, is going to be 24,909. So that means it's going to be right about here. I'm guessing. Now, the next 2 points were 2015, which is year 2, and I had 27,254. So that means this year I am going up to 27,000. So I'm going to say this point. Well, notice what I'm going to do. I'm going to put, in this case, the number 2 and I'm writing 2, 7, comma, 2, 5, 4. That's the point I should be graphing. And then in year 3, I should have 28, 4. So that means I'm going to be a little bit higher right here. This is 3, 2, 8, 4, 2, 6.50. And then if I connect them, that's my line. This is 0.24909. Little bit more than 900. This is graphing using intercepts. But notice I only have one. This intercept. This ends our lovely section. Oh, I could tell you're so excited. Okay. So, I'm going to say bye-bye. Enjoy.